could say that the troubles that would become the American Revolution truly started in 1757. In the United States, we call the little dust-up that happened beginning in that year the French and Indian War, which is rather confusing since the two sides actually engaging in combat were the French, based out of Canada, and the British, based out of the 13 American colonies. Both sides employed Indians as guerrilla fighters. It was fought on American soil, the American colonists fighting alongside British redcoats to decide which country, France or England, would control North America. Of course, winning wars costs money, especially when you have to ship your soldiers across a gigantic ocean. England won, beat back the French, and promptly enacted several taxes, a Stamp Act being among them, on the American colonists to help pay the debt incurred by the war. To the British, this seemed fair. After all, the war was fought in part to defend Americans. To the colonists, this was the height of tyranny, primarily because the ruling body of the British government, the Parliament, had absolutely no members from the 13 colonies. This taxation without representation really made us pretty angry. Of course, the British weren't very understanding either. King George III and his government had a huge superiority complex when it came to the colonists, basically viewing them as rough barbarians since their powdered wigs weren't as tall as wedding cakes. Misunderstanding piled on misunderstanding as hotheads on both continents locked horns. Many colonists, by the way, wanted independence from England about as much as they wanted to jump into a tub full of scissors. They thought of England as their country. Men who understood both sides, like colonist Ben Franklin, tried vainly to appeal to King George III to show a little understanding, but that wasn't in the cards. Some of the most rebellious Americans, including Boston brewer Samuel Adams, met in secret groups that called themselves Sons of Liberty, planning for the day when a move towards complete American independence could be made. Meanwhile, King George III responded to these murmurs of unrest by sending more British troops to occupy cities where the unrest seemed the most violent. Cities like Boston, which would see two acts destined to kick off the American War for Independence: the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. Neither were as simple as they sound. The Boston Massacre started out as just another cold, wintry night in Boston. Some kids were making fun of the British soldiers standing guard in front of a building called the Customs House. It was your typical pranking, throwing snow, bits of rock, ice, etc. It looked like a lot of fun to some adults walking home from the tavern, so they joined in, and soon there was a large crowd yelling and screaming at the redcoats. Then the soldiers opened fire. Tempers flared. To protest yet another British tax, this one on tea, a group consisting of members of the Sons of Liberty slathered on war paint and wore feathers, imitating Mohawk Indians, and went down to the harbor to make a statement. This statement consisted of throwing the valuable tea loaded on the most recently docked ship overboard. History knows this protest as the Boston Tea Party, and it's hard to picture as anything other than a bunch of pale white guys getting a little liquored up and tossing tea into the harbor while cheered on by an adoring crowd. I doubt very much they resembled Mohawks in the slightest. In 1775, the British responded by sending yet more troops to Boston, quartering them in the home of American colonists, basically forcing them to feed and house soldiers out of their own pockets, and arresting many Sons of Liberty. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. And then General Thomas Gage, commanding the British troops, thought it'd be a good idea to deprive all of American colonists of their guns. Just in case. I bet you know what happened next. Riders went out, including the infamous Paul Revere, to warn the colonists that the British troops were coming to confiscate their firearms. Instead of hiding those arms, or giving in, a group of Americans assembled on the town green in the small village of Lexington, waiting for the British to emerge from the darkness. They would be almost comically outnumbered when the morning sun saw the redcoats marching towards them. It was at this point that an unknown colonist raised his musket and in the spirit of, "You can't make me," that made up the very DNA of America, fired the shot heard round the world. One shot that started the American Revolution.